Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Media Watch. I'm your host, Dr. Savvy, and I'm back after a week off, and we have some wonderful guests like we normally do. This time around, I've got a person who is a really dear friend. He hasn't been on the show for ages and ages, but I managed to get him back because he's a very busy person. He's a fundraiser, he's a Rotarian. I say that because I'm not really sure if it's the right phrase, Rotarian, or
it is.
Someone who's a district head or something like that. And also he is somebody that works for Computeraid. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. And he has many facets to him. He's a wonderful person in the context of really helping people. One final thing he did recently is that he's become a councillor. So his help will go out even further to the community that he represents. So the Media Watch show takes place every week. Every week we look at one headline, we follow that by looking at a number of headlines, and then we look at Sikh news or history in particular. So welcome to the show, Mukesh Malhotra.
Hi Savvy. Thanks for inviting me back, and thanks for a wonderful kind of.
Don't believe the hype.
Yeah, don't believe the hype. It's all true, isn't it?
It's all true, absolutely. Before we kick off, right?
Yes.
So what is the right phrase? We said Rotarian, but I think you were a district head or something for a while.
Well, no, it is the right word is Rotarian, and I was a district governor, which meant that I covered an area stretching from out towards Basingstoke to Croydon, and it went down to Banstead. And next year, that same area will grow again, and it will go all the way down to Brighton.
Wow.
So it'll be 106 Rotary clubs with thousands of Rotarians in there.
And I pointed out that you are a fundraiser because you've got the Children in Need badge on, which is particular for this week, taking place the previous week on the Friday. You also do work with End Polio, which I think is a big initiative for the Rotarians as well, isn't it?
Yeah, for me, and the Children in Need is quite important because, in fact, on Friday, what happens is that people were collecting at airports, as they do, and we normally collect just at Terminal 5 in the order of about £50,000 from people giving their loose change.
Incredible.
But the End Polio now is very close to my heart, and myself and my colleague, we've had a project called the World's Greatest Meal, and we're just short of $2 million to helping towards End Polio now, which effectively means, which is the headline news, is it will save 3,200,000 children, i.e. in terms of immunisation. And if you didn't know, polio in India has now finished. It finished back in April. I was lucky enough to be on the stage with the President of India. And we still have 3 other countries to go, and that's Nigeria, Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Well, we will be talking about the unfortunate sad situation with regards to Ebola in a bit, but I wanted to congratulate mankind and womankind
Yes.
with the first headline that we have right now, which is the fact that we as a species
Yes.
have managed to make it by building something, sending it across a 10-year journey. Many researchers, I remember listening to the headline, someone said, if this thing doesn't land, it's 21 years of research down the drain. But we've managed to launch a satellite, and from there's been a lander, and the lander has gone down and sat on a comet. How incredible is that? Well,
I think that's one of the most amazing things in our lifetime. And if you think back 10 years ago when it started, iPads didn't exist. We just got our first iPod, right? So if you think about that and how technology has changed, that technology is 10 years old, and when they woke it up, it was still working, and that to me is an amazing aspect. Yeah,
the ʻfiɪleɪ spacecraft has apparently had a few issues with regards to harpoons that it's got to launch to try and stabilise itself, but it's actually stuck up against a boulder, so there are time-critical issues at the moment because it's not necessarily going to get enough energy, solar energy, so it can recharge its batteries. Sounds a bit terrible. Sounds like the iPad, runs out of batteries on a regular basis.
I think what they're trying to do today, from what I understand, is they're going to launch the drill. The drill is going to possibly twist the lander.
Okay.
And they're making some heavy risks in terms of the fact that if they don't do it, then the project dies within about 10 hours. If they are successful, then the project will continue because the solar panels will be able to generate electricity.
Tell me, we talk about iPads, and in a sense, the space race has given us, multiprocessor, type technology, doesn't it? Microprocessor technology to do all those micro calculations. Do you think that this technology today, although it costs millions and millions to do, and it is a bit of a thing for me, especially it's a thing for you, we hear about the $100 computer that could be going into places like Africa or even mobile phones. And I met a really nice guy recently who said to me that, wouldn't it be great if we got mobile phones that we could put into villages, say in India, which are really don't have internet connection, and it kind of revolutionizes the way in which they can think and get access to education and have more resources. Do you think that we're not using technology enough to change the world in terms of poverty?
I think you've hit it on the head in that sense. You've mentioned that I work with Computeraid, and I think it'd be good to kind of mention that what we've tried to do with Computeraid is to enable you as an individual not to throw away your sexy old toys. What we're saying to you is donate them to Computeraid.
Now, Computeraid, tell us a little bit about it. It's actually something about salvage, isn't it?
It is about salvage, but it's more to do with being able to recycle and reuse existing equipment. So in the days gone by, you used to have Pentium machines, and you used to be able to say, well, we can only take certain level of machines. And before we used to send large monitors, which used a lot of electricity.
The big, gigantic monitors, now we've got flat ones.
Now we're using flat screen. People are donating those, and they're using less electricity. So one of the projects we've done in Africa is that we've managed to take an old container and make it into what you call a cyber cafe.
Right.
But what we're doing is putting that into rural areas. We've reduced the amount of dependency on electricity because we put solar panels on the outside.
So a container is the thing that goes on the back of a lorry, isn't it? A big truck.
That's right,
kind of
or
thing,
going on a ship where you put stuff in with goods. But the idea is that you convert that, it goes pre-built from the UK with all the necessary components. And it has solar panels on the roof, which generates electricity. We're using low energy usage machines, screens as well. And that's enabling then putting on top of the thing a VSAT connection, which is a satellite connection.
So you get
giving
an internet connection
via satellite.
Right, okay.
So which effectively means that people in rural areas who will have issues around power, who will have issues around telecommunication, are now being enabled to do things. And that's brought IT literacy to the rural areas. Now, if we could do the same thing in India or somewhere else, I think it would be a real plus.
It would change people's lives, wouldn't it?
It will fundamentally change it because people will have access to IT literacy, which these days, unless you have that, you're not going to be able to get a job. And also the fact is that they'll be able to look at ways to improve their own lives. Greatest thing is, if they're in a rural area, is agriculture. If they know what the weather's going to be like, they can plan things. Simple things like that. But in rural areas also, out towards the coastline, people are using smartphones. The fishermen use it to work out when the tides are, so they can then maximize their catch and things like that.
So we'll come back to it, and then I think the website for Computeraid is computeraid.org.
That's correct. www.computeraid.org.
So if you work for a company, one of the things I recommend is that you do go out there and find out what the salvage policy is, and I'm sure Computeraid would be happy to take computers and actually, if they don't work, they can salvage them and make them work.
We have a policy that if a machine is donated and it doesn't work, we will try to salvage as much as possible, and that tends to be in the order of about 80 to 90%.
Okay, you can take the boards out or make another screen or make another computer.
Well, some people donate monitors, some donate mice, some keyboards, and we put it all together.
Fantastic.
And we've shipped to the developing world close to 300,000 fully built computers.
That's incredible. Yeah. Very good. Let's move on to the next part of the show, where we actually look at a number of headlines from around the world. I wanted to point out one particular article that I came across, and we were talking about smartphones in particular. This is with regards to the Save the Children Fund, who have actually put together, with professional photographer Michael Christopher Brown, Syrian teenagers have been given mobile phones, and they've taken photographs of the actual camp that they're in, which is known as the Zatari camp. You might have seen it on the news. Not that much press coverage, and that's really my question. I know you're involved in a lot of charity work, but do you think that the world is kind of, especially, I mean, this is a media watch show, are we obsessed with sensationalism? Are we obsessed with news for a very short period of time? Here we've got kids who've got their mobile phones who are taking photographs of the real situation, the real problems that are out there. Are they going to get any press coverage for that, apart from an odd article here and there?
Well, I think it's that they are going to, because if you take the BBC's programme, news round.
This was featured on the BBC website.
And if you think about that it's children who are showing what it's like for them on a day-to-day basis. The challenge, any organisation which is doing fundraising or raising awareness through advocacy work and so on, is actually getting images. Because as we know, an image will tell far more than the written word. And if we've got young news journalists, as I call them, right?
Citizen journalism in one sense, isn't it?
Yeah, you're right, citizen journalism, but I think it's important that these are real children who are suffering at this moment. And the Western press just isn't sharing enough. You know, if it was somewhere else, I think it'd be a different situation. But it's a bit like Michael Burke, and when I know that, you know, we're coming up to the 30 years of Band-Aid and so on. If you think about the storyline Michael Burke brought up 30 odd years ago, today we have similar situations, right? Not in terms of starvation in the camps, but I'm sure there is, because some of those people will not be getting the right type of food and the right amounts. And then if you take issues around Sudan and so on, it's still there 30 years on.
Yeah, I mean, whether it has a lot to play, whether it's investment that maybe hasn't happened, or it may be corrupt regimes, that could be an issue. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think I saw an article recently, I think in The Guardian, talking about the fact that Chris Martin of Coldplay, Ed Sheeran, amongst other artists, it is 30 years since Do They Know It's Christmas, the song that came out.
That's true.
They got, I think there's the hashtag Band-Aid 30 or something. I think we've got a picture of that. They're going to record the show on the Saturday, and it's going to be released on Monday. So obviously it's raising money, but in this case it's going to raise money for the Ebola situation, because there are some countries, and I've mentioned this on the show a couple of times, Nigeria's, you know, quite a few days, it's great, you know, Ebola free. Other countries like Sierra Leone are not. So I think what Bob Geldof has done is actually try to say, well, if we did another record, we could in theory raise lots of money for that. But it's the same thing again, isn't it? It's the point that you made earlier on. The situation is that we're 30 years on and we've still got poverty, we've still got countries that... Is there not a responsibility, and it's my personal opinion, of companies, corporate responsibility, of the fact that, you know, there are certain countries that are investing in Africa, not necessarily ethically, and some countries are richer than others. And I think I saw a list this week of the richest Africans. I think Nigerians were quite up there in terms of, you know, so there's a disproportionate, not only within Africa, but there's a disproportionate in terms of consistency of what multinationals are doing to invest in those particular countries. Well,
I'm fortunate enough, and I say fortunate, that I've worked in Nigeria for over 6 years. I also worked in Ghana and other parts of Africa. And when we think of abject poverty, you have to actually go there to appreciate it. The issues around corporate social responsibility. I've been lucky enough to meet people from Roche and GlaxoSmithKline, and they are giving contributions. One of the things you may not be aware of is something called river blindness. In this country we have an organisation called Sight Savers, and what they've been doing is that they've been, you know, these organisations, these pharmaceutical companies, have actually been donating certain drugs so as to help people. Now, one bit, just one tablet, helps a child not have river blindness. And that's an amazing thing. And that's the sort of thing which I get involved with the end polio now, that many of the things which you're seeing today, like with Ebola, like with river blindness, some of the strategies which have been generated by Rotarians actually is helping these modern day issues.
Rotarians is a charitable organisation. It's great, it brings people together, it does work, and it's fantastic. What I'm talking about is multinationals, and you mentioned pharmaceuticals is great. But in your workplace, there may be some certain you know, charities that people adhere to. I'm not saying that all multinationals can save the world, but sometimes their policies are not that ethical in their own right. I'll give you an example. If you go to the shops and buy cheap clothes, then what is actually happening to regulate the person there who's making the clothes, who may end up giving it to another person who's actually bringing in little kids or bringing in women, and then the factories fall down.
We have this issue, and the storyline you're talking about is, which we've all read about, in Bangladesh.
Absolutely.
And with Primark, and it's in the public domain, so I don't have a...
And the building fell down, but one could argue it's a responsibility of the person who let the building out, but one could also argue that there was no audit done on those individuals that are subcontracting the work out.
I think the concern which you highlighted is the fact that Primark have outsourced the production to a third party.
But we could argue...
And they haven't done enough due diligence. I think that's the word you're looking for, due diligence, about how people care. And I think the biggest issue is more around ethics. And where do you draw the line on ethics? That some countries will be saying, i.e. governments will be saying, thank you very much for coming to our country, and thank you for bringing work, and thank you for employing the people. What they haven't said is that it's become a slave country, that you're paying them pittance to do a job,
absolutely,
and you get a small amount of money. But considering that some of those countries don't have anything, that's why those governments turn a blind eye to it. And I think it's the corporate social responsibility aspect which companies have to adhere to. And this goes back to the ethical situation. Do you pay them the same, do you pay them a living wage? And the question is that a living wage in that country, or is that a living wage in the country where those goods are destined for? And I think that's more of the issue, which is a dilemma for many of the large corporates.
There's a disproportion as well. I'm not going to necessarily do banker bashing, but you know, there are organisations that literally get away with only just having a few billion in terms of fines, and then ultimately that 2 billion could be used for...
Well, let's take that 2 billion. I raised a question just yesterday that the FCA or whichever government organisation is going to receive that 2 billion. I got a response telling me that some of that money will actually go just to legal fees. So knowing what legal fees are in this country, I'm not sure how much is actually left for that 2 billion. But if that 2 billion had been given to redeployed into community foundations, and in this country, community foundations do a huge job of actually doing small-scale grants at grassroots level. They'll do it between £500 and £7,000. But imagine a small organisation, a charitable organisation or a community organisation, if they receive £500. For them, that is real, you know, it's like a godsend.
It's a really difficult question, Mukesh, but you know, what can we do? I mean, we were talking before the show about people power. What do we have in our power?
Well, we have, you know, you take the example which we talked about, and this was the e-petition, right? Every day I must get at least 3 or 4 emails from friends from something like causes.com or 360 Degrees asking me to sign up and gain a voice. Now, there is an expression that if you don't take part, then you're allowing other people to win. And I think that's the same principle applies, that if you take the issue around the poppies, right, there was an e-petition. More than 100,000 people signed up to what was started by the Evening Standard, and the government had to give a response.
Now, these are the poppies that are around the Tower of London, and then they're going to be extended now, the ceramic poppies?
Well, they're not being extended. I think what they're doing is that they're going to be some sort of semi-permanent arrangement, and then it will disappear. But I think people like the Evening Standard have actually said we'd like some sort of permanent arrangement.
Oh, okay, really? Yeah.
But I think the government, as David Cameron had said, he will endeavour to try and extend the period so as to allow people to...
Yeah, I think the official time is the 21st of November, but I'm not sure. Okay, I mean, that's you know, it's an interesting point that, you know, the power is in our hands, but I guess it's ultimately down to whether people are listening or not.
Yes, but then you need to have good people to be able to express that. I've been a community activist all my life, and now I've become a politician. I think the best way to describe it is poacher turned gamekeeper. And sometimes you do feel as a politician your hands are tied, and you're actually more able to express your views being a member of the general public.
But being a person who is, as you said, going into politics, will it be local for the moment? Wish you all the best in the future.
I'm happy where I am, thank you.
Then there's lobbyists as well, isn't there? There's interest groups, aren't there?
And I used to be a lobbyist to some extent, because being a community activist.
Right.
This scenario now is that I can still be a vocal person, but what I might be restricted on is certain aspects. But so far, touch wood, all the things I've been championing for continue to be not suppressed in any way.
Now this show is about media, and I note there was some incredible photographs produced by Robert D. Stevens. He flew up to 15,000 feet above the sky line of Mumbai, took some incredible photographs. If you look at them, some of them are just, I never realised that Mumbai had developed so much, you know, in terms of the number of buildings. I know you've been there a number of times. They've got a couple of, is it the Abami Towers or something there? And, you know, I think one of them lives there or something like that. But I would say it's interesting that this whole, you know, when you look at it, and especially the photograph that's really kind of quite profound, is the picture where all the clouds are there. And it's just masked, and all you see the little skyscrapers kicking out. Is this hiding the slums underneath?
I think if you go to any of the BRIC countries, right, that means in terms of Brazil, Russia, India, China.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is always the case. Having visited China, when you go as a tourist, you only get to see the bits which the government want you to see,
right?
Because you're always taken by a tour guide. But occasionally when there's a traffic jam and the driver takes you left instead of right so as to avoid something, you suddenly see the real...
Well, the trip in from the airport is still pretty bad, isn't it? From Mumbai airport in, there's a lot of slums. Slumdog Millionaire on the world stage suggests that you've got all these skyscrapers that have been built around, but the problems are still there in terms of poverty.
I think, you know, the poverty situation is going to remain for the near future. The true way to actually help eliminate poverty is through education. If you can educate the young people, if you can give them a start in life, I think that's the important thing. And if you think about it, our Asian culture, we've come to this country when our parents came.
With maybe just a few dollars or pounds, well, they came with their savings.
Well, I still hear the story from my dad and from other people as well. They came with £3 and they spent £1.50 in Cairo, and they came with £1.50 left.
Wow.
But the point was, if you apply business or business techniques, one of the things was they would say, we want a roof over our head, we want food in our tummy, and we'll educate our kids to the best we can. And if you think about it, the Chinese families, our Asian families, we take that high on our list of priorities, and we consistently pass that on to our children, that we want our children to do either equal or be better than us.
Absolutely.
And that's what is passionate amongst our Asian families.
Now, I just wanted to, we're just coming to the end of the show.
Okay.
Time whizzes by, doesn't it? 6th of November this year was the date that we celebrated Guru Nanak's birthday. He has been described as a revolutionary, as a person who believed in equality. And I think it's really interesting. I was reading up, there were 3 amazing things that Guru Nanak talks about. He talks about Naam Simran, which is to think about God. He thinks about saying to us, you know, and we need to believe in this, is the Kirat Karni, which is to live a normal householder's life and earn a living in an honest and do hard work. And finally is Wandka Shakna, which really means share with the needy whatever you can spare.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and treat all men and women as equals, regardless of nationalities, religion, or whatever creed they're from. And I was thinking to myself that, aren't these incredible golden rules for any society to get over what we were talking about in terms of poverty?
Well,
you know,
you must have been reading my Facebook page. I put 20 things which Guru Nanak put, and one of the things I put right at the bottom was to travel.
Right.
And people think, why did you put travel? Well, Nanak did travel more than most people.
Absolutely.
And what he did bring back was that he learnt from other nationalities. And I think that is part of the ethos, the fact that he brought back values which he could enhance on within the faith itself.
Absolutely. And I think it's incredible when you think, you know, then Guru Nanak and then we had 10 Nanaks later, you know, if you can do that. Now, somebody said to me once recently, I think it was at an exhibition, and they said all this work that's going on, different groups are doing. I mean, you mentioned some humanitarian work that you're involved in, other people are involved in. Sikhs in particular, when they see Sikhs, they go, oh, that person's doing humanitarian work. I mean, I think it's a great thing to leave behind, isn't it? In terms of your life. It's not because you do it because you want to do it, because you do it because maybe it should be part of life, to be that selfless person.
One of the groups which I talked to through a friend, a mutual friend, is Khalsa Aid.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the work recently, if you think about the work that's taking place in northern Iraq, and also when we've had the floods in India.
And the floods here as well, in Somerset too.
And in India, the government went to the Gurdwara in Amritsar to say, can you create a portable kitchen to feed this many people?
We should say thanks very much to Mukesh, absolutely, on the Amritsar story. Sorry, they cut you short there on that. It is wonderful to have Mukesh with us to tell us about all the initiatives that he's actually doing. And I think the message that we have there, you know, no matter where you are in the world, if you can help other people, it's incredible.
It's the selfish gene, I call it.
Yeah, it's the selfish, just get rid of that selfish gene, get rid of those egos, and make sure you can help other people, because it's not because you want to be remembered that way, because it's just the thing to do, I think. So until next time, my thanks to my guest Mukesh. Wonderful to have you back, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Waiguru ji ka khalsa, waiguru ji ka fateh.